lot,
but
they're going to...
news that came out today about Paul Christ. I guess he spent 8 months last year just not recruiting. So
that's a problem.
Without a recruiting staff, too. It seemed. Like, without, I guess, a department
yeah,
or
it was.
staff for
It
that.
seemed as if that was probably... Now, this is definitely Wisconsin leaking out information to the right people.
As they do.
And then The Athletic writes an article about it, which is how these things work. And it's an article, it's like, here's the downfall of Paul Christ. You didn't know what was going on. And then you get all the inside sources. But that was the main part of the Athletic article that came out, that he spent almost 8 months without really recruiting at all, which...
How is that possible?
In 2022 is unacceptable. So,
But here, like, this is a legitimate question. How does a head coach in any type of atmosphere, any school, any level, I don't care, but especially a Power 5 school, especially a Big 10 school, not recruit for 8 months and no one care or no one notice? Somebody noticed that. Like, think about the crazy recruiting. You're a recruiting guy. You like the stars and know all of those things. Imagine like the people that are covering recruiting for Wisconsin just being like, oh, we just don't have any news for 8 months. That's why it seems fishy to me. That story doesn't seem right.
yeah, I don't know. I'll have to look more into the story. Maybe it wasn't.
I'm not saying you're wrong. I'm saying
No, I know you're not
like
saying that. Your point makes a lot of sense.
The Paul Christ slander with that, which you're right. Anytime a coach gets fired, these stories come out of the woodworks because it's like trying to have a solid reason of why you would fire a guy, especially a guy that has all the Madison roots and seems so nice. These stories always come out to make the decision look more legitimate. However, if a head coach in 2022, with all the recruiting sites, all the news, all the social media surrounding recruiting, if he's not doing his job for 8 months, somebody notices. That's revisionist history.
And then
that's fucking crazy.
they're within the article, they brought up this guy who's a 6'2", 220-pound linebacker from Marist High School in Chicago. He visited Wisconsin for a football game as a prospective recruit, and Rolder was a late bloomer with loads of potential, the type of talent Wisconsin often identified early and signed. There was just one problem that day. So he went to this game. No one talked to him. No one knew who he was or anything about him. So the recruiting operation, he went to this game and no one really talked to him while I was at the game. By December, Rolder had blossomed into a 4-star prospect, and he signs with Michigan, and he's been playing really well for Michigan this year. The lack of recruiting department hurt that heavily, said another source familiar with Wisconsin's recruiting. They probably would have had Jimmy Rolder, who's now at Michigan. This is the guy that they're talking about.
So if that is all true, which I can imagine this person that wrote this is doing a lot of research, not only was Paul Christ and his staff not recruiting well, because that's clearly what the bigger part of this is. The smaller part isn't there like a whole department at every single major school that has like hosts? Usually it's like really pretty girls, like all these things. Again,
I guess Wisconsin doesn't do that.
What?
Wisconsin doesn't do that very much.
They don't have like people that show them
They definitely have
around?
a department, but I mean, obviously nothing great, because the last time that if there was a top recruit, not even top, but he was a guy that was there visiting Wisconsin on a day, you would think the recruiting department would take care of a guy who's visiting
or the
for a
boosters
game.
or somebody. So shit
here's
was
a
going
quote.
After Dan Mullen, like we saw Dan Mullen kind of get outed because of the lack of recruiting.
With
like
Wisconsin.
every other. Okay.
But people knew that Dan Mullen, like there was already kind of like swirling rumors around that he didn't give a shit about recruiting at Florida. Like Paul Christ, that's just now coming out for 8 months.
With Wisconsin, the way they recruit, they've never been a school that does a lot of recruiting with bells and whistles, says Alan Trio, a Midwest football recruiting analyst for 24/7 Sports. They do what they do, and they have success with it. So it doesn't seem like they're really...
Can I just go ahead and say that if in 2020, the year of our Lord, if you're not recruiting with bells and whistles, you're never going to be a top program? I understand Wisconsin has had a lot of success, and they have, in the last 30 years have continuously kind of been in that, especially the bully in their own division. But with all the stuff that schools and teams are doing now, you have to recruit with bells and whistles.
Another recruiting source said that because Wisconsin's department was so understaffed at the recruiting, that I guess somebody left to go work for Michigan State. Those tasked with tracking and interacting with recruits during home football games weren't provided with lists of which players would be attending. This is all from The Athletic. That's how Jimmy Rolder slipped through the cracks, the guy we were talking about.
That doesn't make any sense to me. None of and I understand, and The Athletic does a great job with these kind of pieces, so I believe it's all true. How in the world does that goes back to, when we talked about on Tuesday the difference between the Wisconsin and the Nebraska programs and like the jobs themselves. If you can't find a human being on staff that wants to help with on-campus recruiting, guys, what the hell is going on in that program? I mean, that seems to me like there would be a line out the door inside the athletic department alone that would want to take that next step.
Recruiting has changed so much in the last 2 years, said the recruiting source with direct knowledge. The best way I can describe it when talking about Paul Christ's recruiting strategy was that he was really outdated in his recruiting approach. I think he kind of was stuck in the old age of recruiting in the 90s, where you just wrote letters and only interacted with kids when they came to campus. For the 8 months, no one really took the bull by the horns and just kind of floundered. No one knew what to do. So it seems like there was
a problem.
Okay. Christ. All right.
So what?
Okay, so the director of player personnel, Saeed Khalif, left. Saeed Khalif, I'm pretty sure, has sent mean tweets to me about Michigan State because he left Wisconsin to go to
What's his title?
Director of player personnel. That's
At Michigan State?
He's now at Michigan State.
And he's sending you mean tweets?
Yeah. He quote tweeted mine. It's like, big green nation, like this guy stinks.
I feel
guess
like
what? I was right, Saeed Khalif, but I guess
I also feel like that's just probably something he should not do.
Well, that's how deep I was in there.
You were living rent-free,
emotionally ruined them. That Saeed Khalif was tweeting at me.
Do you think they had like a meeting about it? In a world, I would love if it was like just even if it
I
was
bet
like
Mel Tucker really has no idea who I am outside of maybe he's seen like 2 or 3 tweets.
Okay,
like he wouldn't know me.
Maybe not Mel Tucker, but maybe it was like an unofficial meeting where they're all sitting around and this guy, what's his name again? Saeed?
Khalif, who left Wisconsin last year
to go to
Michigan State. And then I guess Paul Christ did not replace him except for this guy. His name's Johnson something. Eric Johnson, already on the staff as Wisconsin's executive director of football administration. Johnson spent a lot of time.
First of all, I would love to live in a world where they actually did talk about you and everyone was like, we're going to gang up on this guy. With all the changes that's happening in college football, with all the evolution and the NIL deals and conference realignment and everything that you have to do to keep up in this sport, I would venture to say the absolute worst thing that you cannot be good at is recruiting. And if this information from The Athletic that's coming out about Paul Christ is saying that he was recruiting from the 90s, brother, it's 2022. And I know things have changed a lot in the last 2 years, but if you don't evolve your offense, you're getting left behind. If you're not in on the NIL deals and evolving all of that, you're going to get left behind. The single biggest thing that you'll get left behind on is not evolving how you recruit.
I guess that's where they got lost. And a lot of Wisconsin fans were pointing towards 2019 to 2021. Wisconsin had a bunch of great recruiting success. Then I guess this guy, Saeed Khalif, left to go work at Michigan State, which if you are going to give Michigan State credit for something, they do have a great, like their recruiting approach does seem very different. Like they have gotten themselves on the map. Seems like a lot of recruits are interested in them that typically aren't interested. So Saeed Khalif goes over there and is obviously implementing a much better program over there. But I guess after that, Wisconsin did not adapt properly enough with their new,
didn't backfill enough.
Their new people.
Can't do that.
And then their Wisconsin's 2022 class, the first class, which was this year, class of 2022, that did not have Saeed there. They ranked number 44, where they uncharacteristically whiffed on the 4-star in-state offensive lineman, a guy who went to Ohio State and Notre Dame. Though that's traditionally a staple of their program's success. They always get the great guys in state. And they didn't get it, and that was a great indication. And then their 2023 class, which is up right now, that's coming up, it ranks number 54. So now that we kind of see it from the outside looking in, you can kind of see why and then this season's success or lack of success they're like, okay, we got to cut it.
Okay, so bigger picture. So we know that this was happening. This is coming out of Wisconsin. But bigger picture, what is the single worst thing that you cannot adapt to in college football right now? It has to be recruiting. If you're still thinking that writing letters and visiting high schools is the way to go, you're going to get left behind and your ass is going to get fired, right? I can't think of a single thing that a college football program or a head coach could not adapt to that's worse than recruiting.
Well, yeah, that's where his failure was, and that's why he got fired.
You're going to, hot take here, if you're not good at recruiting, you're going to get fired.
No,
That's just a fact.
Yeah.
You'll get worse players.
Like, if recruiting is important, which you think that it is, most people think that it is, if you can't recruit a kid in 2022 to want to play for a school like Wisconsin because you're still writing Dear John letters, or what are they called? What are the letters where you write and like you just change the name? Do you know what? So you guys are too young. Nobody.
Formatted letters?
No, Brandon would know. Brandon would be here. Like it's like I don't know. I sound so old. You know what? Never mind. You guys have you ever written a handwritten letter?
Yes.
Yeah.
Have you, Noah? Okay, good.
Oh, yeah.
All right, just making sure. I figured you guys like had like iPhones in your hand. Anyways, you can't. There is not a single thing a coach can be worse at that's gonna get your ass fired quicker than recruiting. Period.
And good recruiting can save bad on the field results.
Absolutely. But the thing with like a lot of coaches, when you see like, you know, we talk about and we like to throw shade a lot at programs like Tennessee, programs like Texas, A&M, whichever ones you want to look at that have really great recruiting classes, but then they're not developed on the field. Again, if you can't even get those 4 and 5 stars on campus to develop, you're fucking up from the beginning. I mean, you're setting yourself up for failure. And I don't know much about Paul Christ. I don't know much about him as a human being other than what you read and of how nice a person he seems to be. But that's just basically setting yourself up for failure. Like, there's no way anybody can ignore recruiting for that long. So again, in 2022, I don't know, just recruit. Doesn't seem like that difficult of a thing.
ABC. Always be recruiting.
Always be recruiting.